Hello, dear class. I don't know if you got the too short, the too short, and definitely too short videos whose YouTube link I have sent to you, or am sending with this. I'm sorry, an aura of doubt is descending on all my ideas of what is the case. And when you've been reading Malloy for a while, you will find exactly the same thing, to the point where you doubt even your own existence and certainly your ability to remember your own name. So my purpose with these little videos really is to try and soften the blow of reading Malloy, which can be depressing and troublesome in a variety of ways. It seems to be unbelievably bleak, appallingly bleak. And what's more, it's accompanied from time to time by strange, confused, obscene references in which it becomes clear that the storyteller has great difficulty figuring out which of the holes in the human body are supposed to do what. But it's with a kind of obscene schoolboy smut obscenity that we greet this, so that the storyteller appears, on the one hand, to be on the verge of death, a very old man with starkly black ideas of life, and at the same time, somebody who's never grown up. However, the reason that I'm hoping to soften the blow of this book is because those of us with a sufficiently sick sense of humor find it very funny. And I would like you to not try to find it funny. Nobody will ever find anything funny that they have to try to find funny, but to entertain the possibility. In case it's there, you just don't want to activate it, that this, in other ways, rather dreadful stuff is actually quite hilarious. And so I'm going to do something which may not advance that hope in the least, which is I'm going to read bits of it. I'm so sorry. You're much better off doing it for yourself. But I would argue that this book, like all of Beckett's writings, this book is extremely Irish. And there's much to be said for hearing an Irishman read it, which you can do if you go to YouTube and you summon up Jack McGowran, Gowran, McGowran's wonderful account of the Sucking Stones, a passage in this book which is famous as a little tour de force, comic, absurdist tour de force in itself. He's on the beach, and he practices something which is in fact derived, believe it or not, from the game of cricket. In cricket, the umpire or referee, I forget which term you use in baseball, it's the ump, isn't it, has to count the number of balls, of throws, of pitches that a given pitcher pitches, because only 6 in a row are allowed, at the end of which another pitcher is invited to throw 6 more. Occasionally it turns out to be more than 6, because there are incorrect pitches which are replaced by correct ones, and they go on, the pitcher goes on until 6 proper and correct pitches have been thrown, have been delivered. Now, what mustn't happen is that there's an ump by the plate who attends to the propriety of the pitching action and where the feet are placed and so on. And this ump counts the number of throws, the number of pitches, the number of what in cricket we'd call balls. It's not the same as something that is a ball in baseball. It's quite different. It's just a throw, a pitch. And he counts them. And he must not count, he must not allow what's called an over, which is the 6 successive pitches delivered by a pitcher, followed by a different pitcher. They can exchange. One does 6, the other does the next 6, and then you go back to the first guy who does the next 6. But the umpire must count 6. And to do so, it's easy to forget there can be a lot of action on the field of play. And when it comes back, when the ball finally comes back to the pitcher, you, if you're the ump, might well think, so now this is going to be the third? Is it the third? Oh my God, is it the fourth? And you mustn't make a mistake, because there are many people out sitting around the cricket ground, as it's called, who are following, as baseball fans do indeed, following with pencil and paper the exact proceeding of the game and the exact outcome of each pitch. So, in order to facilitate the counting, umpires carry little pebbles or coins sometimes, but often pebbles, in their pockets. In one pocket, you start off each over, as it's called, each round of 6 pitches, with 6 pitches in your right pocket. And as long as you don't forget, in the middle of the over, this would be a disaster, which pocket you're using to transfer into the other one when a pitch has been made, you can count out the 6 pitches from the 6 pebbles in your right pocket, which are now in your left pocket. So Beckett uses this because he was a passionate cricket player. He is the only great writer to actually appear in Wisdom, the book of every professional cricket game every year, an enormous volume, small in dimensions but immensely thick, in which Beckett appears appropriately in only one game, playing for Trinity College. Some of the major schools in Britain and Ireland play against the big sides, the professional sides, the county sides. And in this case, sorry, I'm shaking the very foundations of my video here. In this case, Beckett did not bat. He never came to the plate. And so he's a 0, though present, in the records of Wisdom, the Bible of what happened in cricket. So it's a wonderful non-presence presence that he makes. And this, as many of you will be conscious of the philosophical ramifications behind his absurdist drama of being and non-being, of true and not true simultaneously, he makes a perfect Beckettian appearance in the great book of cricket. And the sucking stone section is inspired, oddly enough, by the activities of a cricket umpire. So what I was hoping to do was read some of the more outrageous sections of the book in a desperate attempt to domesticate them so that you don't find them wild and horrible and crazy. This is absurd, but I would like you to hear them in Irish. I wish we had an Irishman other than Jack McGowan to read it to you. That would be ideal. Next best is possibly me reading it to you in my hardly infallible Irish accent. Third best is you hearing it in your head in your fallible Irish accent, just your idea of an Irish accent, so that you don't try and read it in English, which it wouldn't make any sense. Okay, so I have in front of me the opening of the book. I read that beginning in the very short 37-second little video that I sent you. And I'm now, I hope if it's possible to upload this now already, 9-minute long video. I'm going to read some of the opening and some other little sections. God willing, I'm able to upload this and get it to you, get you to the link, the YouTube link. It's rather exciting to suddenly become, even if unlisted, somebody on YouTube. So after the section that I read, just the opening 10 lines, where he says, except I don't know how to work anymore. That doesn't matter, apparently. What I'd like to do now is to speak of the things that are left, say my goodbyes, finish dying. But they don't want that. Yes, there's more than one, apparently. But it's always the same one that comes. You'll do that later, he says. Good. The truth is, I haven't much will left. When he comes with the fresh pages, he brings back the previous week's. They're marked with signs I don't understand. Anyway, I don't read them. When I've done nothing, he gives me nothing. He scolds me. Yes, I don't work for money. For what, then? I don't know. The truth is, I don't know much. For example, my mother's death. Now, was she already dead when I came? Or did she only die later? I mean, enough to bury? I don't know. I'm sorry, dear class. My page has failed to deliver the next page. Here it is. Perhaps they haven't buried her yet. In any case, I have her room. I sleep in her bed. I piss and shit in her pot. I have taken her place. I must resemble her more and more. All I need now is a son. Perhaps I have one somewhere. But I think not. He would be old now, nearly as old as myself. It was a little chambermaid. It wasn't true love. The true love was in another. We'll come to that. Her name. I've forgotten it again. It seems to me sometimes that I even knew my son, that I helped him. Then I tell myself it's impossible. It's impossible I could ever have helped anyone. I've forgotten how to spell, too, and half the words. That doesn't matter, apparently. Good. He's a queer one, the one who comes to see me. He comes every Sunday, apparently. The other days he isn't free. He's always thirsty. It was he told me I begun all wrong, that I should have begun differently. Well, he must be right. I began at the beginning, like an old bollocks. And like an old bollocks, my videos, my book is disappearing as I read it. It seems absolutely appropriate. Here now, it's back again. It seems to me sometimes that I even knew my son, that I helped him. Then I tell myself it's impossible. It's impossible I could have ever helped anyone. Yes. Oh, I've read this. Let me jump forwards a bit. That I begin at the beginning. Here, I began at the beginning like an old bollocks. Can you imagine that? Here's my beginning. Because they're keeping it, apparently. I took a lot of trouble with it. Here it is. It gave me a lot of trouble. It was the beginning. Do you understand? Whereas now, it's nearly the end. Is what I do now any better? I don't know. That's beside the point. Here's my beginning. It must mean something, or they wouldn't keep it. Here it is. And then he gives us the beginning. A very abstract and difficult beginning, but it's a meditation that is much like all the meditations in the book. And the two people appear on the horizon for no clear reason. He calls them A and C, and they're walking along a road. And finally they come face to face. And the scene in some way, although it doesn't take place in Waiting for Godot, is strangely similar. A bleak place, two figures. And then he gets onto his bicycle. And this is a very difficult operation because, as you'll see, the poor storyteller has a difficulty, one leg much shorter than the other, and very stiff. So he has no way of walking except on crutches or with his bicycle, in which he puts himself horizontal on the bike and seems to, I don't know what he's done with the crutches, but he seems to work his way along on the bicycle. And he addresses this bicycle after a while in lovely terms. Dear bicycle, I shall not call you bike. You were green, like so many of your generation. I don't know why. It is a pleasure to meet it again. To describe it at length would be a pleasure. It had a little red horn instead of the bell fashionable in your days. To blow this horn was for me a real pleasure, almost a vice. I will go further and declare that if I were obliged to record in a roll of honour those activities which in the course of my interminable existence have given me only a mild pain in the balls, the blowing of a rubber horn, toot, would figure among the first. And when I had to part from my bicycle, I took off the horn and kept it about me. I believe I have it still, somewhere. And if I blow it no more, it is because it has gone dumb. Even motor cars have no horns nowadays, or so I understand it. And then he talks a good deal more about the kind of cyclist he was. Crippled though I was no mean cyclist in those days. This is how I went about it. I fastened my crutches to the crossbar, one on either side. I propped the foot of my stiff leg, I forget which, now that they're both stiff, on the projecting front axle, and I pedalled with the other. It was a chainless bicycle with a free wheel, if such a bicycle exists. Ah, dear bicycle, that's actually where he addresses how wonderful the bicycle is. A little dog comes into the story now. Very shortly, he runs over a dog, and this is an event that determines much of the action of the book, because the lady who, I'm going past this terrible passage about the mother. My mother never refused to see me, that is, she never refused to receive me, for it was many a long day since she had seen anything at all. Now, I shall try and speak calmly. We were so old, she and I, she had me so young, that we were like a couple of old cronies, sexless, unrelated, with the same memories, the same rancors, the same expectations. She never called me son. Fortunately, I couldn't have borne it. But Dan, I don't know why. My name is not Dan. Dan was my father's name, perhaps. Yes, perhaps she took me for my father. I took her for my mother, and she took me for my father. Dan, you remember the day I saved the swallow? Dan, you remember the day you buried the ring? I remembered. I mean, I knew more or less what she was talking about, and if I hadn't always taken part personally in the scenes she evoked, it was just as if I had. I called her Mag, when I had to call her something. And I called her Mag because for me, without my knowing why, the letter G abolished the syllable ma, and as it were, spat on it, better than any other letter would have done. And at the same time, I satisfied... I'm sorry. At the same time, I don't know what at the same time. My pages sometimes fly away. I wish there was someone here to receive them and give me money in exchange. So, yes, at the same time, I satisfied a deep and doubtless unacknowledged need, the need to have a ma, that is a mother, and to proclaim it audibly, for before you say mag, you say ma, inevitably, and da, in my part of the world, means father. Besides, for me, the question did not arise at the period I'm worming into now. I mean the question of whether to call her ma, mag, or the Countess Caca, she having for countless years been deaf as a post. I think she was quite incontinent, both of feces and water, but a kind of prudishness made us avoid the subject when we met, and I could never be certain of it. In any case, it can't have amounted to much, a few niggardly wetted goat droppings every 2 or 3 days. And he goes on with more depressing stuff, until we get to something that always sticks in my mind, which is, I got into communication with her by knocking on her skull. 1 knock meant yes, 2 no, 3 I don't know, 4 money, 5 goodbye. I was hard put to ram this code into her ruined and frantic understanding, but I did it. in the end, that she should confuse yes, no, I don't know, and goodbye was all the same to me. I confused them myself. But that she should associate the 4 knocks sorry, I apologize for these unexpected. My screen suddenly decides to go completely blank, and I find now, I've jumped forwards to to the incident of when he runs over the dog. Actually, I'm sorry to have missed the time when he is interrogated by the police and suddenly remembered his name. He can't stop crying out in delight that the police are actually trying to find out. And I've also missed out Beckett's fascination with number, which is, like a life as a prisoner. Imprisoned, nothing else to do, become obsessed with number, with counting everything. And here he says, sorry, he's talking about the usefulness of the Times literary supplement, which was the holy grail of writers to get a review or a mention in it. And it was actually, the paper was slightly thicker than other newspapers. And he says, the Times literary supplement was admirably adapted to this purpose, keeping warm on a bench in winter, of a never-failing rough toughness and impermeability. Even farts made no impression on it. I can't help it. Gas escapes from my fundament on the least pretext. It's hard not to mention it now and then, however great my distaste. One day, I counted them. 315 farts in 19 hours, or an average of over 16 farts an hour. After all, it's not excessive. 4 farts every 15 minutes is nothing. Not even 1 fart every 4 minutes. It's unbelievable. Damn it, I hardly fart at all. I should never have mentioned it. So, I'm sorry, that's a section that gives me curious joy. And I have to say, always did since I first read it. It's not so much that I'm old and share his output of farts. I can't say I do. Here's the first mention of the pebbles, but I'm. This is where the policeman comes along and tries to. He talks about the sergeant. Now the sergeant, content to threaten me with a cylindrical ruler, was little by little rewarded for his pains by the discovery that I had no papers in the sense this word had a sense for him, nor any occupation, nor any domicile, that my surname escaped me for the moment, and that I was on my way to my mother, whose charity kept me dying. As to her address, I was in the dark, but knew how to get there even in the dark. The district, by the shambles, Your Honour, from my mother's room through the closed windows, I had heard, stilling her chatter, the bellowing of the cattle. That violent, raucous, tremulous bellowing, not of the pastures, but of the towns, their shambles and cattle markets. Yes, after all, I had perhaps gone too far in saying my mother lived near the shambles. So there he is, still trying to work out what he knows about the known and knowable world that can be relied on. The answer is not much. And suddenly, this is preceded by one of Beckett's pieces of poetry, which are extraordinary, so beautiful when they come in the bleak landscape of his absurdism and obscenity. Yes, the desire to sit down came upon me from time to time, back upon me from a vanished world, and I did not always resist it, forewarned though I was. Yes, my mind felt it surely, this tiny sediment, incomprehensibly stirring, like grit at the bottom of a puddle, while on my face and great big Adam's apple the air of summer waved and the splendid summer sky. And suddenly, I remember my name. Molloy. My name is Molloy, I cried. All of a sudden now I remember. Nothing compelled me to give this information, but I gave it, hoping to please, I suppose. They let me keep my hat on. I don't know why. Is it your mother's name? Said the sergeant. You must have been a sergeant. Molloy, I cried. My name is Molloy. Is that your mother's name? Said the sergeant. What? I said. Your name is Molloy, said the sergeant. Yes, I said. Now I remember. And your mother? Said the sergeant. I didn't follow. Is your mother's name Molloy too? Said the sergeant. I thought it over. Your mother, said the sergeant, is your mother. Let me think, I cried. At least, I imagine that's how it was. Take your time, said the sergeant. Was mother's name Molloy? They're very likely. Her name must be Molloy too, I said. They took me away to the guard room, I suppose, and there I was told to sit down. And then that he had great difficulty. Even though he lies on a bench, he remains standing but horizontal. And then this woman, the woman in mauve, rises up. But at some point, he rather ceaselessly, rather rapidly runs down poor Teddy, Sophie, or Loy, or Luce, Luce's dog, and the frangibility, the unreliability, the constant failing of names in Beckett's writing to hold their quiddity and remain true rather than being exchanged. Because you're always saying, my name is John. Is it John? Is it John? So uncertainty, the uncertainty principle rules. Anything that he establishes clearly begins to wobble. So he says, I'd hardly perfected my plan when, in my head, when my bicycle ran over a dog, as subsequently appeared, and fell to the ground, an ineptness all the more unpardonable as the dog, duly leashed, was not out on the road, but on the pavement, docile at its mistress's heels. Pavement is sidewalk in British English. Precautions are like resolutions, to be taken with precaution. The lady must have thought she had left nothing to chance, so far as the safety of her dog was concerned, whereas in reality she was setting the whole system of nature at naught, no less surely than I myself with my insane demands for more light. But instead of grovelling in my turn, invoking my great age and infirmity, I'm so sorry. My great age and infirmity is causing difficulty when I try and turn the page. And I do feel as if I have become a character out of Beckett as soon as this happens. It has an appalling ability to infiltrate your life. So I've lost... he runs over the dog, and it's a terrible problem. I made things worse by trying to run away. I was soon overtaken by a bloodthirsty mob of both sexes and all ages, for I caught a glimpse of white beards and little almost angel faces, and they were preparing to tear me to pieces when the lady intervened. She said in effect, she told me so later on, and I believed her, "Leave this poor old man alone." Notice, please, how even this account of things happening apparently in reality are actually open to question. He even says that he ran over the dog apparently, and now his account of it is one that the lady gave him later on, and which he believes. a problem that obviously is at the center of Waiting for Godot. Whether whether Godot is ever going to come, whether the boys actually are his boys in some sense and are actually going to tell him the news, doubt surrounds every event. This is the central characteristic of the Beckett world. Leave this poor man alone. He has killed Teddy, I grant you that. Teddy, whom I loved like my own child, but it is not so serious as it seems, for as it happened, I was taking him to the veterinary surgeon to have him put out of his misery. This is very much Beckett, where you kill somebody but who's actually on the way to be killed already. For Teddy was old, blind, deaf, crippled with rheumatism, perpetually incontinent, night and day, indoors and out of doors. Thanks then to this poor old man, I have been spared a painful task, not to mention the expense which I am ill able to afford, having no other means of support than the pension of my dear departed, fallen in defence of a country that called itself his, and from which in his lifetime he never derived the smallest benefit, but only insults and vexations. And so the crowd, now having had their oh my God, he killed this poor dog, emotion, completely reversed by discovering that the old dog is completely blind, deaf, incontinent, and the rest, all very Beckettian conditions. And he says, I was morally obliged, having killed her dog, I was morally obliged to help her carry it home and bury it. And that becomes, as you'll see if you haven't already, a whole ordeal in which they bury it, but there's an obscurity about who's getting buried. Says his death must have hurt him less than my fall me, and he at least was dead. We slung him across the saddle and set off like an army in retreat. So back they go, and she dug the hole. As he says, it was she dug the hole. You always bury your dog under a tree. I don't know why, but I have my suspicions. It was she dug the hole because I couldn't, though I was the gentleman, because of my leg. That's to say, I could have dug with a trowel, but not with a spade. For when you dig a grave, one leg supports the weight of the body, while the other, flexing and unflexing, drives the spade into the earth. Now my sick leg, I forget which, it's immaterial here, was in a condition neither to dig, because it was rigid, nor alone to support me, because it would have collapsed. I had, so to speak, only one leg at my disposal. You can see how situations like this oblige Beckett to be incredibly literal, and also to divide the world into halves that are actually interchangeable. This comes up a very good deal. So they struggle with all of this, and finally he gets into the house and meets